plate of hot, golden fried chicken sat right in front of her.
The smell was rich, the kind that makes your stomach beg. Yet she didn't touch it, not because she wasn't hungry, but because she was afraid. Across the table, a young millionaire watched her with a soft smile, believing he was sitting with a perfect woman, not knowing she was hiding the biggest truth of her life. And that one small moment, that silent lie, would change everything. This is not just a love story. It's a story about pride, fear, and the cost of pretending to be someone you are not. Stay with me, because what happened next will make you question everything you think about honesty and self-worth. Welcome to Amos Tales Africa, where every story carries a lesson you will never forget. In a quiet village, where the wind moved gently through the trees and the earth smelled fresh after every rain, there lived a young girl named Zala, who was known by everyone, not only because she was beautiful, but also because she carried herself like someone who believed she was above the place she came from. And even though the village was full of kind people who greeted each other with warm smiles, Zala often walked past them with her head held high, as if she did not belong there at all. Zala was 21 years old, and her beauty was something people could not ignore, because her skin glowed like the early morning sun, and her eyes were sharp and confident, but inside her heart, there was something she never wanted anyone to see, and that was the truth, that she was just a simple village girl who had never lived in the big city and who did not understand many of the things people there used every day. As time went on, Zala began to dream of a different life, a life where she would be seen as rich, modern, and important, and she started to practice speaking like city people and pretending that she understood things she had never even touched before. And whenever someone asked her about her past, she would change the story in a way that made her seem like she had always lived a better life than the one she truly knew. Even when she was alone, Zala would imagine herself in big houses with shining floors and bright lights, using machines and tools she had only heard about from others, and she promised herself that if she ever met someone from that world, she would never let them see the real her, because she believed that the real her was not good enough. And so, without telling anyone, Zala made a silent decision deep in her heart that from that day forward, she would bury her truth and become the person she thought the world would respect, even if it meant living a life that was not truly hers. In a busy city where tall buildings touched the sky and cars moved like a river that never slept, there lived a young man named Kofi, who was only 25 years old, but had already built a life many people could only dream about. And even though he had money, a big house, and everything he needed, there was still a quiet space in his heart that felt empty because he had not yet found someone who made him feel truly seen and understood. One day, Kofi traveled outside the city to visit a business partner, and on his way back, his car passed near the village where Zala lived, and when he stopped for a short rest, his eyes happened to meet hers as she walked by, and in that moment, everything around him seemed to slow down because he had never seen someone carry such beauty and confidence at the same time. Zala noticed him too, and instead of showing the simple and natural self she had always known, she quickly became the person she had practiced to be, speaking in a calm and polished way while standing tall as if she had always belonged in places like the city. And Kofi, who did not know anything about her past, was drawn to her even more because he believed she was exactly who she appeared to be. As they spoke, Kofi found himself smiling more than he usually did, and he felt something new growing inside him, something warm and exciting. And before he left, he asked if he could see her again, and Zala, hiding her nervous heart behind a confident face, agreed without letting him see how much she was both excited and afraid at the same time. From that day on, Kofi began to visit her more often, bringing small gifts and kind words, and each time they met, he saw a girl who seemed perfect in his eyes, while Zala continued to build the image she wanted him to believe, carefully choosing her words and actions so that he would never question where she truly came from. But even as their connection grew stronger, something unseen was quietly growing between them too, and it was not love, but a fragile wall made of small hidden truths that Zala kept adding to with every meeting. not knowing that one day that wall would become too heavy to carry. As the days slowly turned into weeks, the bond between Zala and Kofi began to grow stronger, and what started as simple conversations became long moments filled with laughter, dreams, and shared silence that felt comfortable. But beneath all of this, there was something Zala carried alone, something heavy that she never allowed to reach her lips. Each time Kofi visited, he brought pieces of his world with him, telling stories about city life, about machines that made work easier, about homes filled with shining objects that Zala had only imagined in her thoughts, and instead of asking questions or admitting that she did not understand, she nodded gently and spoke as if she already knew everything he described, even when her heart quietly whispered that she was pretending. There were moments when Kofi would casually mention simple things, like cooking with electric stoves or eating with fine cutlery, and in those moments, Zala would feel a sudden fear rise inside her chest, but she would quickly hide it behind a soft smile, changing the topic or giving short answers that made it seem like nothing was strange. And Kofi, trusting her completely, never saw the struggle behind her calm face. As time went on, the small lies Zala told did not remain small, because each one needed another to protect it, and soon she found herself remembering not just what was true, but also what she had said before, making sure her story did not break. And even though she looked confident on the outside, inside she was becoming tired, like someone carrying a heavy load that no one else could see. One evening, as they sat together watching the sun slowly disappear behind the horizon, Kofi looked at Zala with gentle eyes and told her that he wanted to take her somewhere special, a place where they could spend time together in a way that meant more than their usual meetings. And as he spoke, Zala felt both joy and fear at the same time, because she knew that stepping into his world would mean facing things she had been hiding for so long. Even though her heart was filled with questions and quiet worry, Zala smiled and agreed, telling him that she would be ready. But as she walked back home that night, her steps were slower than usual, and her thoughts were louder than ever, because deep inside, she knew that the life she had been pretending to live was about to be tested in a way she could no longer control. The day finally came, when Kofi arrived to take Zala to the special place he had promised, and as she stepped into his car, her heart was beating faster than ever before, not only because she was excited, but because she felt like she was walking into a world where every small mistake could reveal the truth she had been hiding for so long. As they drove through the bright city streets filled with lights and tall buildings, Zala looked out of the window with quiet wonder, trying her best to act like everything she saw was normal to her, even though inside she felt like a stranger in a place she had only ever imagined. And when they finally arrived at a beautiful restaurant filled with soft music and shining tables, she took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay calm and confident. They were led to a table where everything looked perfect, from the clean white plates to the neatly arranged fork and knife placed beside them. And as Zala sat down, her eyes quickly noticed the cutlery, and in that moment, a wave of fear quietly rose inside her, because she did not know how to use them. Yet, she kept her face calm, so that Kofi would not notice anything unusual. When the food arrived, the smell of the delicious fried chicken filled the air, and Zala's stomach tightened because she was more hungry than she had ever been. But as she looked at the fork and knife, she felt frozen, unsure of what to do, and instead of asking or trying, she slowly leaned back and gently said that she was not hungry yet, even though every part of her body was begging her to eat. Kofi looked at her with a small smile, thinking she was simply waiting or being polite, and he began to eat his food, enjoying every bite, without realizing that across the table, Zala was silently fighting a battle within herself, watching the food, feeling the hunger, and at the same time, holding tightly onto the image she had created. As time passed, the plate in front of her remained untouched, and the longer she sat there, the heavier her heart became, because she knew that all it would take was one simple truth, one honest sentence. But that sentence felt harder to say than anything she had ever faced, and so she chose silence instead. When the dinner came to an end, Zala smiled softly as if everything had gone well, but inside She felt empty, not only because she had not eaten, but because she had just let her fear take something beautiful away from her. And as they left the restaurant, the night air felt colder than before, carrying with it a quiet regret that she could not escape. That night, as Zala returned home, the quiet path that once felt familiar now seemed longer and heavier, and with every step she took, the hunger in her stomach grew stronger, but even more painful than that was the weight in her heart, because she could not stop thinking about the moment she chose silence over truth. When she entered her small room, she sat down slowly and looked at her empty hands, remembering the plate of fried chicken she had left untouched, and her mind began to replay everything again and again, from the smell of the food to the way Kofi had smiled at her, not knowing the struggle she was hiding behind her calm face. Her stomach made soft sounds in the silence of the room, reminding her of what she had lost, but this time it was not just about food, because she began to realize that she had also lost a moment of honesty, a chance to be real. And the more she thought about it, the more her chest felt tight with regret. She lay down, but could not sleep, turning from one side to the other as her thoughts grew louder, and she kept asking herself the same question over and over again, wondering why she had been so afraid to speak, and what would have really happened if she had simply told the truth and said that she did not know how to use the fork and knife. As the night grew deeper, Zala slowly began to understand something she had been running from, and it was the truth that pretending had not made her stronger or better, but instead had taken something away from her, something simple and real. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel not just regret, but also a quiet desire to change. Before her eyes finally closed, she made a small but powerful decision in her heart, and she told herself that she could not continue living behind a mask, because if she did, she would keep losing moments that could have brought her joy. And even though she was afraid of what might happen, she knew that the next time she saw Kofi, things had to be different. The next day came slowly, and as the sun rose, Zala woke up with a heart that felt both heavy and determined, because even though she was still afraid, she knew that she could not continue hiding behind the life she had created, and for the first time, she chose courage over fear. When Kofi came to see her later that day, he greeted her with the same warm smile he had always shown. But this time, Zala could not return that smile in the same way, because her mind was focused on one thing only, and that was telling the truth she had kept hidden for so long. They sat together in a quiet place, and for a moment, there was silence. Not the comfortable silence they once shared, but a silence filled with words waiting to be spoken. And Zala felt her hands grow slightly cold as she gathered the strength to begin. With a soft voice that carried both fear and honesty, she finally spoke, telling Kofi that the person he thought she was did not fully exist, and she slowly explained how she came from a simple village, how she had never used many of the things he spoke about, and how, on the night of the dinner, she had been very hungry, but chose not to eat because she did not know how to use the fork and knife. As her words flowed, her eyes became heavy with emotion, and even though she felt exposed and vulnerable, there was also a strange sense of relief growing inside her, because for the first time, she was no longer pretending, and when she finished speaking, she lowered her gaze, afraid of what his reaction would be. For a moment, Kofi said nothing, and that silence felt longer than anything Zala had ever experienced. But then, instead of anger or disappointment, a gentle laugh escaped from him, not a laugh of mockery, but one filled with warmth and understanding. And when Zala looked up in confusion, she saw something in his eyes she had never expected. Kofi gently told her that he already knew she was not from the city, not because she made mistakes, but because he saw something real in her that could not be faked, and he explained that he had been waiting for her to feel safe enough to tell the truth on her own, because to him, honesty mattered more than perfection. He then smiled and said something that surprised her even more, explaining that he too had once been in a place where he did not understand many things, and that everything he knew now was something he learned step by step, just like anyone else, and that there was nothing shameful about not knowing, only in pretending to know. In that moment, Zala felt something inside her break, not in pain, but in release, like a heavy weight finally falling away. And for the first time since she met him, she felt truly seen, not for who she was pretending to be, but for who she really was. After that moment of truth, Zala sat quietly, but this time her silence was no longer filled with fear, because what she felt inside was something new and peaceful, like a heart that had finally stopped running and had found a place to rest. And as she looked at Kofi, she no longer tried to impress him, but simply allowed herself to be seen as she truly was. Kofi, with the same gentle smile, told her that the world was not built for people who pretend to know everything, but for those who are willing to learn and grow. And he explained that even the richest people once started with nothing, learning slowly, making mistakes, and asking questions without shame. And as he spoke, Zala listened carefully, feeling each word settle deeply inside her heart. A few days later, Kofi took Zala out again, but this time the place felt different. Not because it had changed, but because she had changed. And when the food was placed in front of her once more, she looked at the fork and knife, and instead of fear, she felt a small smile rise on her face, and with honesty in her voice, she softly told him that she still did not know how to use them well. Without hesitation, Kofi gently showed her how to hold them, guiding her slowly and patiently, and even though her first attempts were not perfect, she laughed at herself, and for the first time, eating became something joyful instead of something to hide from, and the same fried chicken that once brought her regret now became a symbol of her courage to be real. As time passed, Zala began to grow, not into someone different, but into a better version of herself, someone who was no longer afraid to ask, to learn, and to accept where she came from. And the pride she once carried slowly turned into confidence built on truth, not on illusion. And so, the story of Zala did not end with shame, but with a quiet strength, teaching a lesson that many forget but few truly understand. And that lesson was simple yet powerful, that hiding who you are may win you attention for a moment, but only truth will bring you peace that lasts. Because in the end, it was not beauty, wealth, or perfection that made Zala worthy, but the courage to say, "This is who I am," and the wisdom to grow from there. And in the end, she didn't lose him. She found herself. The girl who once sat in silence, hiding her truth, became the woman who could smile, learn, and live without fear. And that simple moment with a fork and knife became the beginning of a new life built on honesty. Because sometimes the biggest thing you need is not money, not beauty, but the courage to be real. And so, my beautiful sister, never pretend to make someone or your partner happy, okay? Because you will lose the best of your life. If this story touched you, then you already understand the lesson many people ignore. Subscribe to Amos Tales Africa, because the next story might just change the way you see your own life.